Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this late afternoon for a very important conversation that impacts all of us. And a big thank you to the HLI alumni and local elected leaders for making the time of joining us. It is a unique yet important conversation on the cannabis industry. This webinar is one of many virtual events that HOPE has been doing during this past year to ensure our network stays informed and engaged, even during these difficult times and often isolating times that the pandemic has brought. We hope that you are enjoying the programming that we provided and that you will enjoy and participate in today's program. And please use the Q&A and the chat function. Love to hear where you're all from. And so please identify yourself through the chat and make sure you put some questions in the Q&A. As you know, the cannabis industry is growing rapidly in our state. And as an organization, HOPE is always interested in not only learning the facts, but also ensuring that women and especially Latinas are the forefront of all conversations needed. When we are part of the conversation and when we are part of leadership, we can also be part of the decision-making process. And we know that our voice is critical at all decision-making tables, including that of the cannabis sector. The goal of our panel today is to provide you with information and the expertise of our guest speakers to be well informed, to be able to shape our own stance and our opinions on the subject. We are grateful for the support and partnership of WeedMaps and look forward to continuing this conversation beyond this webinar. I am happy to introduce our friend and key supporter, Carl Felicio. Oh, Carl, I had this right, Felicio. I want to raise my hands and click when I say it. Vice President at WeedMaps, who is also here to share about their work and their role that they play in to ensure equity across the cannabis sector. A little bit about Carl. Not only is he an incredible communication expert and has worked at the Labor Department both under President Clinton and President Obama, but I loved how he, early on in his career, how he showed his support for the women's movement. By being part of and working for the Coalition of Labor Union Women and the Women's College Coalition. So right away, I knew Carl, we were in good hands when we were talking to Carl and our vision of ensuring that Latinas are at the decision-making table. Welcome, Carl. Thank you so much for joining us.
Here I am. Hi, Helen. Thank you. Here I am. Hi, Helen. Thank you very much for that very nice introduction. Special thanks to the staff at HOPE for putting this together. Thank you to the remarkable panel and moderator. A special shout out to two of my friends who are on the panel, Diane Goldstein, who is doing remarkable work at the leadership of LEAP, and Supervisor Nora Vargas, who I've come to realize early in meeting her that it is Nora's world and we just are living in it, and if you follow that adage, you are definitely a better person. And to all of you that are participating in this and that are interested in this topic, thank you very much. This is really a remarkable time in California, in our country, as we actually get to build a brand new industry. And social equity has to be at the very center of this industry. And if you don't believe that, if you don't support that, I don't think that you have any business being in the business. The promise of cannabis legalization, the promise of medical cannabis is not going to be realized unless there's true social equity, and that the people who were most severely impacted by the war on drugs, Black and brown people, Black and brown communities, are at the table and have not just a stake in the industry, but a stake in its future. Before I talk about, just to help set up the conversation, I want to briefly, I'm supposed to talk about why WeedMaps supports HOPE. And instead of that, I would rather say something personally. I'm a direct beneficiary of HOPE. In my life, not just my work, in my life and in my career, I have been blessed and honored and privileged and lucky enough to have friends and colleagues and bosses and mentors who have either gone through the HOPE program or been affiliated in some way. And it has made my life rich and interesting and better. And for that, I would like to thank you. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for what you're doing, and please keep doing it. Okay, let's talk about weed and post Prop 64, which was passed, as we recall, in 2016 overwhelmingly. As a result, there's been a lot of good news as a result of Prop 64. There's been some not so great news. The good news is that today, California is the world's largest legal cannabis market. At the same time, today, California is the world's largest illegal cannabis market. Despite the overwhelming support for Prop 64, only about 27% of California jurisdictions have full access, full retail. There are great, for legal cannabis. There are great cannabis deserts throughout the state. There's a variety of reasons why. That's going to change for a lot of reasons, but mostly because of COVID. COVID did a great PR campaign for cannabis, gave it a lot of credibility, and governors, not just our own, but across the state, Democrats and Republicans, slotted it as an essential industry. And so that did a lot. As jurisdictions now have to look at ways to make up shortfalls in their budget, cannabis, they're taking a whole new fresh look at cannabis and the tax revenue that it can create. It did $5 billion in tax revenue in California in 2020. It's expected to do about $8 billion by 2025. That's not all the money in the world. That's not an answer for everything, but more and more local leaders are looking at, in California, are looking at legal cannabis with a fresh perspective. The power of what it can do should not be overlooked. But if social equity, again, is not at the center of it, then all of that means nothing. The industry will not succeed if social equity isn't taken seriously and done right. If social equity is more than just some nicey that we talk about, and instead real programs with measurable outcomes that really help people and that include everyone, particularly those who built the industry, and that's communities of color. But it's Pride Month, and I'd like to remind folks that a big part of the cannabis industry is cannabis retail. Cannabis retail was started in California by an LGBTQ person for the LGBTQ community in an LGBTQ neighborhood. Dennis Perone started the San Francisco Buyers Club along with a group of other people, both medical advocates, personal freedom advocates, the AIDS activist community, in response to the AIDS crisis and the horrible illnesses that were resulted in the AIDS medication. No other industry can say that that they were founded that way. So I'm going to just leave you with the idea that this is a remarkable time. It's a remarkable industry. There's lots of opportunity. If we want something done right, let's put women in charge. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Carl, for that, and very touching words. And I didn't realize the history connected to cannabis. And so thank you for your enlightening words, for your graceful words about hope and the impact that we've had on your life. It was lovely to hear. And so much of what conversation today becomes very personal very quickly, because when we're talking about leadership, when we're talking about our communities, we're talking about the most personal aspects of our lives is where we live and the communities that we're trying to develop, and equity should be at the center of that. So I love that message. I am now very proud to introduce our moderator for this evening discussion, and she'll bring on the panelists. I just want to remind everyone to please welcome, welcome and introduce yourself on the chat, and to ask any questions to the Q&A. We will be monitoring that. Tonight's moderator is a dear friend of Hope and a personal friend of mine. She is an HLI alum, Vanessa Delgado, and she wears so many different hats. I know she's very proud, as I would be as well, of being a Stanford graduate with a dual major in political science and Chicana studies. She completed her master's administration of public administration at USC as a Dean Fellow. And she began her career working in the cities of Pico Rivera, Anaheim, and Downey. And in community development right away. So she has a great background in community development. I know Ms. Delgado for not only going through the Leadership Institute, but seeing her leadership as a business owner and a managing partner of Azure Development, where she creates and designs and builds exceptional affordable housing for our communities, as well as commercial projects throughout the Southwest. And she has always had a role in civic engagement, and specifically serving on her local city council as the city of Montebello in November of 2015, and also served as mayor in 2017. And in 2018, she was elected as a state senator for District 32 and completed a short term, but an eventful one. So we're very proud to invite and to have Vanessa Delgado, our HLI alum, moderate this conversation. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, and it's wonderful to see everybody here on Zoom. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, just because it's such a changing field, and I think it's one that Latinas should really be involved in. So excited to introduce the panel today. If they could join us by turning on their cameras. And so we are going to do some quick introductions for our guests. Just really quick questions. Just if you could tell us when I call your name, what your first job was, what your Hope involvement has been, and your role in the cannabis industry. And I get to start with Supervisor Nora Vargas, and I don't think I've had a chance to actually call you Supervisor. Congratulations on that. She's joining us from San Diego County. So Nora, what was your first job?
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I guess the question is my first paid job or my official job, right? Because but I would say my first job was working for Miller's Outpost. I'm totally dating myself. I think that's why I love country music. I don't know. But I also want to say, hi, Carl. I'm so happy that I get to be on this panel today. Let's see. Hope, I think one of the things about Hope that's been fantastic is the numerous amazing supporters that I've met throughout, folks who have supported the organization that I dearly appreciate and love for the work that they do. So Carl is one of those folks. So it's good to see you. So I became the first, one of the first folks to join the Leadership Institute for Hope in 2001. I became the first Latina chair from San Diego County. And I think I've served on every committee that you can think of. And I'm really proud that I've been, one of my missions was to ensure that Latinas from Imperial County, Orange County, and San Diego County, the southern part of, I love my LA ladies, but we wanted to make sure we had southern representation. And so my involvement with Hope has been about 20 years, and I feel really, really grateful for all of that. Did I miss anything? I think I'm good. Okay, good.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us tonight. I know you're super busy. Can't wait to ask you some questions later. We also have Diane Goldstein joining us today. She's the Executive Director at Law Enforcement Action Partnership. And today she's going to share with us what her first job was, any HOPE involvement that you've had that you want to share with us, and what your role in the cannabis industry is.
So my first job was actually at Taco Bell. And I'm going to date myself, Supervisor, because I worked at the Torrance Miller's Outpost as well. So so we're it's going back a long way. This is I probably come into contact with HOPE in through not the cannabis industry previously, but in my work in criminal justice reform. And I'm currently the Executive Director of Law Enforcement Action Partnership. But I think really the link for me is the expansion of women in leadership. And, I just want to share how proud I am to be on this panel. And probably what's not well known about me is I was born in Mexico City in the 1960s, and I immigrated to the United States when I was 5 years old. And so culturally, I'm Mexican. And so having the presence of Latinas, it really means a lot to me. And I was so excited to receive this invitation. So my work is around criminal justice and ensuring that we end the war on drugs, because quite frankly, in California, it is right now that disparities continue to show that even post Prop 64, that Hispanics are arrested in disparate numbers, as are people of color, but Hispanics tends to be the number one demographic that's arrested still for marijuana and cannabis.
Well, thank you, Diane. And we're going to dive into that later too. I definitely want to ask you some questions about that. Another panelist tonight is Claudia Mercado. She's the founder and CEO of CaliBueno. So Claudia, what was your first job?
My first unpaid job was babysitting for my younger brother, for my mother, and being her sixth grade being her translator to help her get, gigs for cleaning homes. My official paid job was actually a job that my sixth grade teacher got me filing paperwork at one of her friend's corporate law firms. That was my summer job. I got involved with HOPE back in 2011. Actually, one of my Mills College sisters invited me to an event and told me, hey, you can't miss this luncheon. It's once in a lifetime. And I was like, what are you talking about? You're talking crazy. And I think, that was a pivotal point for me. I went to this luncheon and I just had met Helen, and I just saw all these great women walking into these positions of influence and power in our state. And I was inspired to join. I applied and I was part of the 2012 cohort. And since then I've been involved and do my best to just support, all of my classmates. I see Marisa's online, and just keep that friendship and also be a resource. I did get appointed to the Osteopathic Medical Board. So I must say that I'm already serving my 9th year. And when I first joined, I was about 9 board members, and I was the only Latina, and now things are changing. So that's really promising. And I got into the industry for cannabis because I saw, the injustices in the industry towards, people of color. And I was excited about being an entrepreneur. I have an MBA from Mills College, and I wanted to just make sure I showed up and I represented. And I can go into more detail, but that's...
We will definitely dive into that. But before we do that, I have one more panelist to introduce, Violeta Aguilar-Wyrick, and she's fast becoming one of my favorite HOPE sisters. But she's the Chief Equity and External Affairs Officer at Catalyst Cannabis Company. Violeta, welcome today, and tell us a little bit about your first job and what you've done with HOPE.
Well, I think my first job as a daughter, as an immigrant, it's just being the oldest daughter, and wearing the many hats. My parents had their, they always had to have their own business. So, I was just at a Juneteenth this Saturday working our booth, and I just remember when my parents had, when I was in high school, and I was working one of their booths they had a small business. So my parents' business was my first job. So they've always been hustlers. So I think that's where I get my hustle gene. And I am Chief Equity and External Affairs for Catalyst Cannabis Co. We are based out of Long Beach, California, where I oversee all of our political, policy, community outreach work. We do have our Catalyst Cares initiative, where we really try to be very intentional about, and our mission is to bring our weed for the people philosophy beyond our stores and into our surrounding communities. Our core values are labor. We have great partnerships with our UFCW brothers and sisters in labor. My background is in labor, so this is something that's very important, and working with Catalyst has been great to now be on the employer side, on the employer industry side, community outreach, social equity, social justice, and best prices. And that really is what drives everything that we do. So we'll be talking a little bit more about the work and how we incorporate all of those values into the work we're doing. So thank you so much. And my involvement with Hope is I've met some of my best friends. My first encounter with Hope was in 2013 when our Hope sister Gaby Plasencia, now Councilwoman Gaby Plasencia, came to, I was working at the time with Senator Roth. So she came and did her lobby visit. I happened to be the staff that took the meeting. And now she's one of my best friends. I ran her campaign out here in Riverside. And every year after that, Hope Sisters here in Riverside, I'm in Riverside County, would like to tell me, Violeta, you have to apply to Hope, you have to go to Hope. And it never really worked out. And finally, last year, it was just the right time. And so I was part of the 2020 class. We're the COVID warriors. So that was it's obviously a very tough year, but I could not have gotten through 2020 without the support and I tell Helen all the time, it was the right time for me to be in Hope. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to take a deeper dive with each of our panelists, starting with Supervisor Vargas and kind of hearing a little bit about their individual roles. And I'm going to ask a series of questions, but I'd love people to, if you have a question, put it in the chat, and all of the Hope staff will kind of grab them. So when we get into the larger Q&A. All right, Supervisor, can you tell us a little bit about what your role has been so far, your experience with cannabis policy, any changes? What have you seen from the government sector in San Diego?
Well, first and foremost, thank you again for the opportunity to be here. And I think there's a lot of, I think this is such a great panel because there is so many missed opportunities in terms of the engagement of Latinas and women of color, particularly in this industry as we're moving forward. And I will be honest with you, I followed a lot of what was happening around this issue specifically. There was a lot of changes in our local city councils and our board of supervisors after 2016 as well. But the truth is, this is an issue that I've been immersed in now. On the campaign trail, I started learning a lot more about it and really thinking about what the social equity piece was. The other piece that I also learned a lot about is sort of the stigma that still is around cannabis. And I think that that's a real conversation that we have to have, particularly in our communities. There's still a lot of misinformation around the why and why this matters and why this is a social equity issue. But I will say that I'm really proud that in January, shortly after I was sworn in, I brought a board letter, and I happen to serve as the vice chair of the board of supervisors, and I brought a board letter forward to end the prohibition of cannabis within the county of San Diego and develop a program. Sorry, that's Rocco, he just got home. A program that will begin addressing the harms of the war on drugs. And so I am really proud of the work that we're doing as a board, because prior to this new board of supervisors, and talk about representation matters, the last board of supervisors really didn't, they really didn't look at this from a social equity piece, right? This board before us really wasn't taking into account a lot of the issues that for far too long communities of color were being criminalized at higher rates, and really I think we have a great opportunity to really change things around. And so it's been a really amazing opportunity for me, and I will say that I consider myself someone that when I don't know enough about an issue, I will do everything I can to become an expert quickly. And so a lot of calls with a lot of folks, folks like Carl. This past weekend, I toured the facility at the Originals, I think in Los Angeles. Fantastic facility. I learned a lot from what a great opportunity there is for the number of jobs and the work that they're doing with formerly incarcerated folks, with veterans. I mean, this is an industry that could really, really help our communities. I'm going to be honest, for me in the county, it's going to take us a little bit longer because of where we're at. We just passed a motion last week where it's going to take us about 2 years because, you know, environmental reports and things like that need to happen. And I get that, but I'm a little bit on the sort of, let's get this done because I think there's a lot of opportunities for our community. So that's where I am right now. And it's a great opportunity for me. And again, I do think that there's a lot of opportunities for the education piece about cannabis and what does that mean to our communities. Number one, the decriminalization, and then also the opportunities for jobs. And then, like I think Violeta mentioned a little bit, and hopefully she'll talk a lot about more later around the making sure that it's folks from our communities who get to have this piece. And I had a wonderful conversation with Claudia Mercado. I think when I first met her around this issue, she educated me on it, you know, a couple of years ago, and I didn't know a lot about it. So I'm excited to continue to have this conversation on this panel. So thank you.
Yeah, you know, something that you said and Carl actually mentioned too about the lack of cities actually passing legislation that allows it on the local level. When I served as a mayor for a very short period, but we allowed manufacturing, testing, and deliveries, and there was a recall effort on me because of that. So how do you mitigate the opposition and try to find a middle ground? Like, what is your plan for these 2 years to engage people?
So a couple of things. We have been very clear as part of our board letter that in community engagement is a piece of it. We do have some very vocal folks who have very opposing views, but I think overall the board understands that that this is really important and that we need to do right by our communities, and that bringing equity and justice in the mitigation of the cannabis industry will absolutely make a difference in how we move forward. And so, you know, I actually was talking to somebody. I know that there's some conversations, and I think there's some, you know, other counties have done some good things and lessons learned of what not to do as well. But I think, you know, having served on the community college board, what do we do to make sure that we're, you know, providing opportunities for young people who want to be able to get into this industry? You know, there's a lot of conversations that we have to have about banking and what does that look like, right? In terms of the safety piece about it. And so I do think that, you know, for me, I mean, everybody who knows me knows that I'm not afraid to take on issues. I consider myself that I feel are really critical and important for our communities. And again, these are tough issues, right? When I was walking precincts, the precinct that is really close to my house is very, you know, frontline underserved communities. The lady said to me, you know, Supervisor Vargas, people are, you know, smoking and it really bothers me. And so I think there's some educating that needs to happen so that just like what we did with cigarettes, right? I mean, like, just don't smoke in front of me. Like, there's a lot of conversations and people don't want to have the conversations because we're still talking about the policy and how do we expand it. And at the same time, wanting to make sure that people who don't want to be around it are okay. It's okay not to be around it as well. And so it's kind of like a really, I don't know. It's still, like I said, there's a lot of stigma around it and there shouldn't be. I think there's a lot of great opportunities for us to talk about it. And I think the more of us that are having this conversation, the more we normalize it. I don't know, for lack of a better word, and it becomes part of our common ground and of who we are, right? I mean, how many times have we heard, like, you know, our family members say, you know, like the conversations around cannabis. And I think we have, you know, I worked for Planned Parenthood for many years, so I know how to take on tough issues. Yeah. and really be able to connect them back to the community. So I think I'm feeling good about this work, and I think it's the beginning of great work that we'll do together.
Super proud that you're taking that on, and I know the Hope Sisters will be a resource to you. But I love that the family conversation, like even the older ladies in my family a couple years ago, like cannabis, like, oh no, that's bad, those are, you know, drugs. And Now it's like, can you get some of that lotion for me, you know, so I can sleep and all that.
I don't even get it. And then everybody's like, oh, but it feels so good. You know, and like, and there's just so much misinformation. And I think that we can do a better job of that. So thank you. Yes.
Love it. Thank you. All right, we're going to go to Diane. So please save your questions for the supervisor. She's going to be with us the whole time. So just put them in the Q&A. And Diane, so you actually worked closely with Prop 64 and the campaign around that. So can you tell us a little bit about you being in the forefront of this industry, how we can truly keep social equity as like the forefront of the issue?
Yeah, you know, there's a couple things. I want to speak to the ban issue. You know, I think one of the compromises that was made during the campaign, and, you know, the supervisor understands this, you understand this, you know, legislatively, sometimes you have to compromise in order to move the ball forward. And I look back at the campaign, and I think the biggest mistake was the local bans. And, you know, but we needed the League of California Cities to go neutral. And they did because of that. And so it was very strategic. And because we were able to neutralize them, it helped to pass. And so for me, the compromise on that was the significant social justice changes that came about because of Proposition 64. So I want people to understand my law enforcement career started in 1983 and ended in 2004. I ran a special investigations unit as a sergeant, which was a multi-agency surveillance team that was primarily tasked with narcotics investigation. And then I was a division commander, but what I saw that came out of Proposition 215 in 1996 was how law enforcement undermined the passage of the law. And so this compromise with the League of Cities really undercut law enforcement. So it was helpful. But what I think is really hard for me, and, you know, social equity for me is the social justice aspects. You know, I'm a firm supporter of the regulatory equity that I'm seeing proposed across the country, because I think it's important for us to provide reparations to communities that have been over-policed and harmed in this very, very clear fashion. You know, I'm going to be right up front about that. Is, you know, is the drug war 50 years later, because it has been 50 years now, has been an abject failure, and it's created and supported, you know, systemic issues of injustice. And we need to talk about that. And people are uncomfortable talking about that. And so forums like this, I think, are really critical to people who are regulators that need to understand why we're proposing, you know, automatic expungement. So I pulled up the latest stats, and I think it's really critically important, because Prop 64 was very much a success, even though disparities continue to be an issue. Is following the passage of Prop 64, cannabis arrests in California dropped 56%. That's, and when you look at those numbers, you know, that's pretty staggering. Yeah. It's, you know, that's tens of thousands of people that we're not criminalizing. And most important out of that was that felony arrests dropped by 74%. And again, you know, we as a society have to ask, what do we want our criminal justice system to do? And what we know is that the drug war needlessly criminalized people. It propped up systems of injustice, over policing. You know, it took law enforcement's eye off the ball from doing what we should be doing, which is preventing violent crime. Yeah. And preventing people from being victimized.
Thank you for your leadership on this issue. It's made a change in so many people's lives. But can you tell us and share with the group, you know, the federal impacts versus what we're doing in the state. Can you kind of inform our leadership here at, you know, the HLI women, Hope Women, what that difference really means?
Yeah, so, you know, this year has been a very interesting legislative year across state, localities, and federal. And I think what's really important for us to understand is that we really need the federal government to change the banking laws. You know, it's not just about decriminalizing, you know, the MORE Act, which is really important, but it's safe access to banking. And it's also descheduling. There's a lot of different components in here that will help make the cannabis industry very successful, you know, and create opportunities for people. And so yes, you know, we have the 10th Amendment, we have states' rights, we have the ability to, in many ways, you know, kind of ignore that, you know, that federal government, but it is impacting the industry because it's creating an unsafe industry in many ways. You know, we don't have interstate regulatory trading. You know, taxes are too high. We have, you know, the inability to provide banking, which is critically important. You know, I've talked to, I know many cannabis operators, and, you know, I know people who walk into banks or walk in to pay their taxes to city governments, you know, $50,000 cash. And what you're doing is by the federal government not allowing safe banking for the industry, it creates opportunities for bad actors, to hide money, not pay taxes, you know, or B, creates opportunities for people to come in to victimize people. And we've seen that in California. We've seen that happen where cannabis operators have been robbed or killed because we don't have that infrastructure in place that creates that safety for them.
That's so fascinating. And I would imagine for Latina entrepreneurs maybe trying to get into the industry, if it's an all cash industry, it's harder to get loans. And so I would imagine it's a barrier to starting a business.
No, absolutely. And I think that if we're really going to talk about how we promote equity in marginalized communities, and it's important, is we have to connect not just the social justice equity, but we have to connect the safety equities. And how do we do that? We have to lower barriers. We have to have automatic sentencing expungement, right? I mean, you know, you know, San Francisco did it. I think the city of Los Angeles, you know, has done some of it. But, you know, one of the things that I think has been really important as we've carried legalization across the United States, right, is what I saw with what we did here is that sentencing expungement has become a norm. You know, that people are not like, if you see ballot measures or if you see legislation, you know, sentencing expungement and reducing incarceration and creating opportunities in that fashion. Because, you know, what many people don't know is because cannabis is just one piece of the work we do. Is in California in particular, I also work with Californians for Safety and Justice, and they have a sentencing expungement bill. In California, if you're convicted of any crime or even just arrested for a crime, your record is intact for 100 years.
Wow.
So you can have a case dismissed and there's still a record of it somewhere. And until, you know, you get a pardon or an expungement, or you go in and understand how to use the system, you know, you may have to pay for an attorney in order to do it. Yeah. And so we have to tie all these links. We have to reduce barriers. That includes automatic expungement of people's criminal histories.
Thank you, Diane. And some of your comments relate to what it's like to be an operator. And we actually have one with us today in Claudia Mercado. Fascinated to hear a little bit about your story as a business owner, Claudia. and you have real life experience in what it's like to get a permit and be in this industry. So can you tell us what it was like for you to open a business in the cannabis industry?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. Well, like anything new, you get excited and you're living the honeymoon. But you definitely, there was a period of time where I was definitely committed, and I knew that it was almost like, going to college or, getting a job and knowing that it's going to be your career or getting appointed. And I knew it was going to be, a 4 or 5 year road trip to profitability. So just knowing that, on top of everything you have to deal with on a local, state, and federal level, it's not for the faint of heart. So, I do caution, we are promoting equity, but running a business is not for everybody, and running a cannabis business is not for everybody. With that said, I am promoting, more Latinas to join the industry. And by me joining, I hope to be a role model, and I hope to lead the way. And I'm also learning how to be a good business partner with my local city members, with the local city. I'm a business partner with the state. I'm a business partner now with the IRS. So, learning how to navigate those relationships has been really eye-opening. And it kind of allows you to see that, Latina entrepreneurs, we're not facing this just in cannabis, it's nationwide. We're the ones opening the highest rate of businesses. But, to Diane's point, there's so many hurdles in cannabis. We have the banking and, having to walk in cash to a bank or having to walk in cash anywhere in the sums of $135,000 is psychological warfare. Like it's, it sounds like it's something like out of a movie, but when you actually do it, like you're risking your life, right? And you have to be okay with that for a few minutes, right? And then at the end, you have to think about it. Well, why am I doing this? And the reason I got into this industry is because, just quick, I was in tech, right around 2012 when I was doing Hope, and I also saw the tech industry had only 2 or 3% of people of color working in the industry, and it was hard to get in. I was also appointed to the Osteopathic Medical Board, and I saw that the opiate epidemic was taking place. I looked up the CDC website for the opiate crisis, and the whole country was just lit up and almost in red. Like we were facing an epidemic, people were dying. Fast forward to 2016, and I looked at the timeline and I said, this is coming. Am I going to jump into this? So, the way I jumped into this industry was by kind of looking at the whole state of affairs for the country and where we're going as a country, because the Latino cohort is here to stay, and we are the future of this country. And I think, cannabis provides a vehicle for us to build generational wealth, but also to get our community out of the trauma mentality. And that trauma the stigma comes from trauma of our significant others being separated. And, people are fearful of cannabis because nobody wants to go to a birthday party and not see their dad, there and think, and know that their father or cousin or brother is sitting in jail. So Latinos were very family oriented. And when our families get, separated and disjointed, it's traumatic. So, I'll leave it there. But being in the industry it's been fun. There's a lot of challenges, but overall, I feel like, things are moving in the right direction. And, now having somebody like Nora step in and really advocating for this, it's like game changer. It's like you have the whole squad rooting and you're like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, and she is not afraid to back down from fights.
Yeah, so go Nora. And everybody here, on this call, so.
Yeah, so, okay, so it sounds like you would do it again if you were faced with a choice to open a business in the cannabis industry.
Well, I actually, what motivates me, to be honest, I usually tell myself, Claudia, you already did this. You just came back to do it better, because we're not going to get it right. And, nobody's perfect. So I know there's different paradigms of people who think differently, but eventually this will be good for everybody. But yeah, if we had a chance to do it again, I'll do it again for sure.
Nice. Okay, so there may be an HLI or Hope person watching this who wants to open a shop, wants to get a license. Can you just tell us what your experience was to get a permit or a license? What was that like in the jurisdiction you're in?
Yeah, I would definitely take a look at your local jurisdiction and see what policies, like it was mentioned before, not all the counties or cities are open to this idea. So if you happen to be in one of those cities, or if you're not, maybe take on the leadership role and advocate for those changes to happen and show them what they're missing on and show them the leader that you are before you even get a license. Say, hey, I'm the one you've been looking for. I'm here. I'm ready to do the job. Let's build a relationship together. It's a win-win. Your city gets money. Our community is healthier. This is about health and wealth. And if they already have those policies in line, fast forwarding, then, you know, do take the time and think in what area you want to play. There's different, you know, it's very challenging. There's the retail piece, there's the manufacturing, distribution. Just kind of find your passion and do your business analysis of where you want to play, run your financials. And also, you know, what makes more sense for your community. If you, for example, you own property in the green zone, and you get to be an owner operator and you also own your real estate, it's almost like a win-win all around. It's really challenging to open up a business in cannabis because the first thing you need to get a license is to have a facility. So, you know, we know we know real estate is going up, and that's also a barrier to entry. So having to sit on an empty building, you don't want to do that. You probably go bankrupt before you open. So if you have the chance to buy property ahead and plan ahead, I know there's cities, you know, coming in 2 years. So maybe you start now and in 2 years you're ready to launch. So definitely do your planning. Give yourself about six months to a year to really know where you want to go.
Yeah, it sounds like if anybody is out there wanting to get involved as an owner, you know, the supervisor in San Diego has said 2 years, right? So that may be a growth area for the Hope network.
And I'll just keep an eye. I mean, the whole state's going to open up. So, you know, there's operators that I know, a lot of strong women that start with 1 dispensary now have 3, 4. So, yeah, the women are definitely stepping up to the plate.
Great. Well, let's hear from Violeta. She is working in the sector, you know, everything from labor and also doing community outreach. So can you tell us a little bit about your role, Violeta? Like, can you break down the layers that you see in the industry? It's still super confusing to me.
Yes, so my role, so there's a couple of things. So like Claudia was mentioning, you know, there's a bunch of different sectors. And as you really look at, you know, like our Catalyst Cannabis Go, we're a retailer. We have 5 stores currently open, 3 in the Long Beach area, about to open up a 4th one in Long Beach, 1 in Santa Ana. And we have our micro business. So that's a micro business is where you have in one space or in one retail, distribution and manufacturing. But besides that, we are growing very rapidly. This year alone, we're going to be expanding from 5 stores to 13. So we're going to be opening in the next few months 8 stores. And then next year, we're going to be going into the 20s. One of our competencies or skill set that we've really, through a lot of the community outreach, our labor partnerships, we've mastered how to win those licenses. And really it comes down to showing and, you know, going to those municipalities, you know, like in the city of Long Beach, in San Diego, you know, as we're going applying in, you know, we just want the city of Oxnard, we want in Stanton, and really showing that we are the best operators, not just because we have great prices, but because we are very intentional about going into communities and really showing and really demystifying the industry. We have a collective bargaining agreement where we have a labor partnerships with every single local, basically from Fresno down to Imperial Valley. So I oversee all of that work. And I mean, at the end of the day, you know, from, you know, my background is in labor and really I'm an organizer. And as I think about the work that we're doing with Catalyst, as we're thinking about the community outreach work that we're doing, where we are creating partnerships with community organizations to do record clearing events so that we are able to pipeline people and, you know, expunge those records so that then we do the job fairs so that then we start pipelining them. And, you know, in retail, really, that's the entry point, you know, because, you know, I do have some statistics, you know, just as an industry, it's still the wild, wild west, you know, we have manufacturing, you have retail, you have distribution, you have cultivation. So each one of them, you know, has its different, its growth and how, and its different needs as it's growing. But we are really just at the early stages where we're developing everything. It's almost like a startup. So, you know, as of January 2021, there were 321,000 jobs across 37 states in the legal market. California being the leading employer with 57,970 full-time equivalent jobs. So, you know, just every single year, there's been about 24,000 jobs, you know, just last year alone, that you have a huge growth. Unfortunately, on the On the owner side, the industry does not reflect our communities. You have about 2% Black ownership. You only have about 6%, brown ownership. And, I was trying to get some numbers. We do have a little bit better numbers when it comes to women, with about a quarter of women owning cannabis, some sort of being in the cannabis space. I was not able to get the numbers for Latinas. Unfortunately, I really tried. There's still very few data when it comes to some of these numbers. But, for us as an employer and how we're thinking, and this is really, a result of a lot of the conversations that we have with our labor partners, and thinking about the industry as an economic development, from an economic development perspective, from a workforce development perspective, and what are the barriers? So there's obviously barriers of entry for the ownership. So we recently have been working with, and we have supported, we developed a social equity pilot and incubator with a social equity applicant in the city of Long Beach, where we've set them up with basically, they're using our delivery license, and we set them up with inventory, compliance, just all of our resources. And even then, they're now open. We are now one-to-one with the city of Long Beach in supporting an industry, a social equity business. But the barriers are still that, they're still, like Claudia mentioned, they're still not able to access banking. There's still lots of marketing that needs to happen. So, a lot of times the conversations around, well, if we only have more delivery licenses, which is a conversation that's happening in the city of Long Beach, that's gonna, lower the entry barrier for folks Black. But the reality is that it's not just, once even with all the support, there's executive mentorship, there's so much additional support, and it really is going to take those public-private partnerships. It's not just about throwing more additional grants and funding. It's about having this holistic approach of uplifting community. And then just from, for us as retailer, we're growing very rapidly, and I see it in our workforce. How are we creating those workforce development opportunities and those pipelines? Because the reality is the majority of us, are not going to come into the industry as owners. That's the bottom line. We're not, the majority of us are going to come in through those retail jobs, through those manufacturing. So how are we being intentional as an industry in developing workforce training and developing apprenticeship and articulating with the community colleges, with the universities? And really, our bottleneck right now, as we're looking to staff all of the stores, is that we want to promote from within, but we are having to hire so many managers, and a lot of times that skill set is it's the soft skills that just we're trying to get into the community colleges so that they have this management, those HR. In my department, doing the policy community work, I just hired one of our bud tenders who actually lost her job through the pandemic. She used to do PR. She came as a receptionist. So identifying those opportunities for us to grow from within. It is a very unique industry. Yeah. It's very fun. It is very young. But really, we are at such a pivotal point for us to be able to embed into policy, embed into the work that we do. And really, for me as an operator, I've done a lot of work in labor. I've done work in community, as an organizer, and working for a legislator. And I know the challenges, but really for us as an industry, we have a lot of power in being a leader and uplifting community and having this community work and having labor and uplifting everybody to have a voice and to have a seat in the industry.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I'm really liked about this industry, is that there is this opportunity to have living wage jobs and for people to grow wealth. And I think that's fabulous. Can you all believe we're almost out of time? We've only got 6 minutes left on our panel. It has flown by. So I just want to take a minute for all of you to offer any closing thoughts. 1 minute from each of you. Anything that you think we should be mindful of moving forward. Anything you want to leave us with, and we can start with you, Violeta.
One of the things that I think it's really, really important is for us and to, as the demystification of the industry, and that really when I first told my mom and my parents that I was that I took on this client, that I was going to start doing cannabis, she at first I was so scared, but then she told me, and it's like, oh well, I do need some of the alcohol, but el masaje. So we have to so So it's going to take people like us, like I, that I am a mom, like, so when I think about my community outreach, I don't want my kids to have access to products. So which is that much more important for us to, have those conversations around public safety. What does public safety look like? So, so anyways, I will wrap it up.
Okay. Claudia, any closing thoughts?
I think the future is bright with cannabis.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Diane? Any closing thoughts you want to leave for everybody?
Yeah, I think it's really important for people not only in the industry, but, advocates to understand how the legalization of marijuana is leading us to dismantle the entire war on drugs. But what I also think that I always ask is that there is this exceptionalism around the issue of cannabis or maybe psychedelics, and that what we have to remember is a lot of the same issues reside, and so we have to start looking at how we define community health and safety, and we have to invest in resources at the front end, sentencing, expungement, uplifting communities, infrastructure, job training, and the cannabis industry can lead the way for the future. But let's not forget everyone that's currently impacted by the criminal justice system around all drugs, and we need to reform the entire system. I'm not saying we're going to legalize all drugs. What I'm saying is we have to have that recognition that the drug war in its entirety has always been about social control and marginalized people.
Thank you for that. Final words, Supervisor?
Well, I think it's the importance of, it's not just about creating these social equity initiatives that look really good on paper or doing, press conferences and press releases around it, but actually putting the resources behind it so that we are being effective in what we're doing. And so for me, it's, emphasizing everything that all of my colleagues have shared already, but, including the technical assistance, how to run a retail business, the distribution, the manufacturing, the marketing, and what do we do to remove the barriers for the applicants that have been impacted by the war on drugs for so many years. And so a lot of these obstacles have been unintentional consequences for many of the folks in our population. And I think it's up to us to, like everyone has said, demystify this topic. And really, I think we have an opportunity to really engage our communities and really talk about the realities of it and let people ask questions and remind them that there is no dumb question, right? And so, and when people say, "Ay, este está fumando marihuana," okay, let's talk about that. What does that mean and why is it important? And it actually is better than some sort of pharmaceutical. I don't know. I mean, let's have that conversation about what that means and what has been embedded in us for such a long time. So I am still learning so much. And I think that, and I have, the ability to be around a lot of experts and folks who come and meet with me. But I think translating that and making it simple for our communities is going to be key for this work. So I really appreciate the opportunity on this panel.
Well, and while you're on, we have probably time for this one question that's been asked by our Q&A session here. Do cities and counties profit from cannabis license and permits? In your experience, what are you looking at?
Yeah, they can. And so I think one of the biggest challenges for us is that the prior Board of Supervisors, which was very conservative, decided not to, they had 5 folks who were the ones who were only focused on this. And so it's created a lot of barriers for everyone, but I'm hoping that now as we're expanding it and from this social equity piece, there will be additional dollars. And part of what I've been thinking about and we talked about in our board letter is how do we bring those dollars back into the community, right? For some of these programs to reduce recidivism, to be able to create partnerships. That's, I think, where the power is of some of these dollars and being able to do this work.
Yeah, and just the one thing for anybody who's on the city level, when I was looking at this research too, I think cities have to be mindful that you can go over a certain number where you're overly taxing the industry and you actually won't get businesses. So it's a very fine line of bringing benefits back to the community, but also and giving an equitable tax or whatever this permit fee is. I think we have time for one more itty-bitty question before we turn it back over to Helen. It's about consumer protections in California and how can operators really have quality cannabis in a free market system. So I don't know if Claudia or Violeta can help us with that one.
Yeah, so CaliBueno, really briefly, we're also a micro business. So we started as a distributor, packaged and sold over 1,000 pounds, worked with over 16 farmers, small craft farmers up north. So we get to go to the farms. One of the things that we really pride ourselves at CaliBueno is HACCP and our quality control. So we're folding in what the FDA and USDA will require from us so that we are ready for that interstate commerce. So I would say, cannabis is one of the cleanest products you're going to find in the dispensary or in the shelves. One of the cleanest products that you will find like on a shelf compared to like, Whole Foods, because of the way that we test it, which just really quickly brings up another point, like being compliant and being compliant and keeping true to the regulations is really expensive. So it's easier to cheat. So we do have to make sure that the cities who bring in operators hold them accountable for high ethics and practices, because that will directly impact your consumers and it will directly impact your city's society, structure and how they feel about cannabis.
Very true. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to put a plug in because I think we're really lucky that our California Commissioner, Ricardo Lara, is actually spearheading the National Cannabis Insurance Framework. And so I think that's another really important conversation that we are not a part of. By we, I mean Latino population, right? That I think it would be really, really great to have him be part of this, always putting a plug on for him. But I do think that, I think it goes back to this idea of representation matters, right? When you have folks from the community, we start looking at things from a different lens. And so it's what Hope has always wanted us to do. And so here we are. And I just want to make sure that everybody knew about that because I think it's really important.
Yeah, thank you, ladies. You are all pioneers in this industry that I think Latinas should be at the table. And thank you, Helen, for bringing us all together.
Yes, and a big thank you to WeedMaps. When we were having this conversation with Carl, we all know that there's a lot to discuss. And as I saw one of our HLI alum, Sylvia, mentioned, this is just basically scratching the surface. We want to ensure that we do have follow-up sessions. This recording will be available to not only the HLI network, but beyond. And so this is the start of a conversation. And what I love about this moment in time is that we get to see Latina leaders and look at everyone here, Diane, your roots in Mexico and todo. We get to see us all shine and really start taking the leadership of defining how we want industries to show up in our community, who we want to lead them and to be supportive of them. And of course, how we ensure that Latinas are at the center of navigating this and pushing this forward with our communities in mind. So I just want to give everyone a big thank you. Vanessa Delgado, you did an incredible job as a moderator. I think you have a future in television if you ever wanted it, but I love all the work that you're doing with affordable housing, so let's keep on that. So thank you again to everyone, to WeedMaps, for everyone's expertise, their wisdom, to our fantastic panel, and I just want to thank you all and stay tuned. I know we didn't get to all the questions. This is just the beginning, and I look forward to engaging and continuing this conversation. Thank you, everyone. And to the Hope team that made this possible. Great job. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Hasta luego.
Buenas noches. Adiós.